All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely fascinating real estate case study. We're going to unpack the story of Jordan. She's a 32-year-old pediatric night nurse who took what was, honestly, a pretty jarring family slight and methodically transformed it into a cash-flowing real estate empire. As you'll see, this whole story is basically a masterclass in patience, establishing really firm boundaries, and just brilliant financial strategy. Now, you know how every great story has that one spark, that inciting incident? Well, picture this. It's a Sunday family dinner. Pot roast is on the table, complete with a nice ivy border tablecloth. Jordan's dad reaches into his jacket, and he slides this white envelope across the table to our 36-year-old brother, Kyle. Inside that envelope, $60,000, straight from the retirement account meant for his house down payment. And when Jordan quietly asks if maybe there might be any help for her own down payment someday, her mom just pats her hand twice and drops this line. "You can rent somewhere, honey. You've always been fine." Okay, let's dive into this because to really understand the math we're going to look at later, we absolutely have to look at the family dynamics first. We're dealing with a really stark contrast here. On one side, we have Kyle's reality. He's older, he's frequently between jobs, and he has a long track record of financial bailouts. We're talking a replaced car at 19, paid off college loans, a cleared 5-figure credit card debt, and now this 60 grand gift. In this family, money just naturally flowed to whoever was drowning. But then, on the other side, is Jordan's reality. She's working grueling 12-hour night shifts in the pediatric intensive care unit. She drives a 12-year-old Honda, clips coupons, and this is the most important part, she has quietly built up $48,000 in secret savings, literally just $500 at a time. So, that brings us to Section 1, the $60,000 envelope, the inciting incident. That $60,000 envelope really did change everything, but definitely not in the way her family expected. Instead of getting into some massive argument at the dinner table, Jordan just drove back to her cheap apartment above this incredibly loud laundromat, sat down with a yellow legal pad, and made a hard choice. She was done. Done asking her family for anything ever again. She decided right then and there to chart her own path in the highly affordable Dayton, Ohio real estate market. She wrote down the exact amount of her secret savings, $48,212. The very next morning, she called her local credit union. She got this kind loan officer named Denise, who apparently cheerfully chewed gum through all their calls, and they ran Jordan's numbers to see what a nurse's salary could actually borrow. Now, the final figure was lower than Jordan hoped, but she decided she was going to make the bank's number work. She just had to figure out how. To figure out that how, she headed down to the Greater Dayton Real Estate Investors Association. They met in its church basement off Wayne Avenue. And walking in, she saw it all. Flippers strutting around in expensive boots, veteran landlords, the whole shebang. But crucially, she met a 71-year-old veteran investor named Earl Novak. Now, Earl was stoic. He was famously unimpressed by pretty much everyone, and he tested her right out of the gate, warning her about the harsh reality of fixing broken toilets at 2 a.m. But Jordan? She kept showing up, month after month, and eventually, Earl became her mentor, teaching her the really unglamorous, nitty-gritty math of the business. Moving on to Section 2, the math of house hacking, and breaking down that first investment. Armed with Earl's tough love and basically a giant stack of library books, Jordan shifted her focus to a tactical strategy to actually buy her first property. It was a 1924 brick duplex on Wren Street that had been sitting on the market for 11 days. And this brilliantly illustrates a really powerful wealth-building tactic called house hacking. Let's break this down. The duplex cost $148,500. Because she was going to live in one half of it, she was able to use an FHA loan that required just 3.5% down. That came out to about $5,200 out of pocket. Here's the kicker, though. The other half of the duplex was already occupied by a tenant paying $850 a month. Her total mortgage, including taxes and insurance, was $1,140. So by applying that tenant's rent directly to her mortgage, Jordan's net cost of housing plummeted to just $290 a month. I mean, that was less than half of what her loud laundromat apartment cost, and now she actually owned the building. For anyone looking to break into real estate, this shows exactly how letting a tenant subsidize your mortgage is an absolute game changer. But hey, the math only works if you've got the grit to back it up, right? And Jordan survived this first property through just sheer, immense physical labor. First off, when the inspector found some old knob and tube wiring, she coolly negotiated a $6,500 credit, literally pricing the willingness to walk away into her voice. Second, when Earl's prophecy inevitably came true and a toilet broke at 3 a.m., she didn't call a plumber. She fixed it herself, still in her hospital scrubs, using a flange wrench and a YouTube video. And third, she meticulously logged every single repair and expense into a binder, and she'd bring those spreadsheets straight to Earl to have her budgets brutally critiqued. All right, Section 3, recycling capital for growth, seeing the Burr strategy in action. So having successfully stabilized her housing costs on Rent Street, Jordan basically went into overdrive. She funneled every saved dollar and every single overtime shift straight back into her bank account to enter a rapid expansion phase. She was turning the momentum of that one property into a growing portfolio. To fuel that rapid growth, she used a very precise financial mechanic known as recycling capital. Here's how it works. She bought a distressed estate sale property on Marigold Street for $85,000. She then put $15,000 of her own cash and a whole lot of sweat equity into renovating it and rented it out for $1,100 a month. Now, because she improved the property, the bank appraised it at a new, much higher value of $130,000. She then refinanced the property, paid off the old loan, and pulled roughly $25,000 of her original cash back out. And the best part? It's entirely tax-free because it's a loan. She then used that exact same cash on her next deal. It's just a brilliant way to keep your money moving instead of trapping it all in one single property. Let's move to the timeline and see how this strategy compounds across what was, honestly, an incredibly aggressive 18-month sprint. Remember, her family told her she was fine. That was her inheritance. So she decided to make that literal by filling a wooden key rack with 4 brass hooks. Month 1, she closes on the Rent Street duplex. Fast forward to month 7, she buys Marigold. By month 14, using that recycled capital we just talked about, she purchases a bungalow on Cedar Avenue. And finally, at month 18, her mentor Earl actually retired and offered her a seller finance deal on his own pristine Hawthorne duplex. And he did this specifically because he knew her books were perfectly clean. So there it is, 4 hooks, 4 keys. But meanwhile, we got to talk about the number 38,000. It is just such a perfect contrast. It shows Jordan's methodical, cash-flowing growth right up against her brother Kyle's completely chaotic financial strategy. While Jordan was out there literally tearing up 1970s carpet while wearing a respirator, Kyle took out a $38,000 home equity line of credit against his new house to fund a house flipping venture. A venture, mind you, that involved taking a quick weekend course and immediately buying a $600 pizza oven on his mother's credit card. Obviously, the flip just sat on the market. It was dead weight, slowly eating away that entire $38,000 line of credit. Which leads us to Section 4, the newspaper revelation, the climax of this 18-month sprint. Look, you can't keep a secret like this forever. A reporter for the Dayton Business Courier had actually noticed Jordan at those real estate meetings and managed to convince her to do a front-page feature. Well, when that article dropped, the fallout was rapid fire. First off, Aunt Sharon forwards a photo of the physical newspaper right to the family group chat. Her dad quietly noted how proud he was that Jordan was sitting on a brick porch that his own father had actually built. But her mom, 3 full days of absolute pin-drop silence. And that silence finally culminated on a Monday morning when Jordan was summoned to a very tense family tribunal right there in her parents' kitchen. Picture the scene. The newspaper is sitting open right there on the kitchen counter. And her mother's reaction? It reveals a massive structural obstacle in this whole family dynamic. She didn't say, "Wow, Jordan, look at what you built." Nope. She said, "You lied to this family, you've got 4 houses, and your own brother is drowning." It is wild. Jordan's success was instantly weaponized as a failure. In her mother's eyes, the fact that Jordan had financial stability and wasn't using it to rescue Kyle was a direct betrayal of how their family worked. And this brings us to Section 5, the price of being fine, establishing boundaries and finding true independence. The real, profound price of those boundaries hit hard a few days later during yet another pot roast dinner. Her parents slid a manila folder across the table to Jordan. Inside, a refinance application to bail Kyle out of his failed flip and his late mortgage payments. Because he didn't have the credit, they needed a co-signer. Her mother explicitly offered Jordan a seat at the family table, literally the exact same warmth and acceptance that $60,000 had bought Kyle, if Jordan would just provide a single signature. It was an ultimatum, plain and simple. Risk her newly built 6-door portfolio to save her brother, or remain entirely on the outside. Right in that critical moment, sitting at the table, staring at the pen in front of her, Jordan remembered a piece of wisdom her mentor Earl had shared with her about his own son. He told her, "Help that never asks you to grow isn't help." Empowered by that thought, Jordan put the pen down. She refused to co-sign the loan. But she didn't just walk away. She offered Kyle a totally different kind of help. She told him to sell his house at a loss, walk away clean, get a steady job, and apply to around her Marigold property under a standard lease. Basically, she offered him the chance to learn actual, true financial responsibility. So the crucial point here is what happens next. The aftermath of establishing these strict boundaries is honestly incredibly revealing. Believe it or not, Kyle actually took the deal. He sold his house, he cleared his debts, he went out and got a job driving a forklift, and he became Jordan's tenant. Now he pays his rent early, and he even comes over on Sundays so Jordan can sit down and teach him how to budget. The guy is finally growing. The mother's outcome, however, is a bit heartbreaking. It's estrangement. She was just unable to let go of that old family ledger where money always flowed to the one who was drowning. She hasn't set foot in Jordan's house since. The emotional dynamic of the family completely and fundamentally shifted, but it actually allowed both siblings to find their own footing. Jordan finally realized that being fine wasn't just some consolation prize, it was the exact inheritance she wrote for herself, one single key at a time. It took immense discipline, a real willingness to sit down and learn the hard math, and honestly, the sheer courage to set really uncomfortable boundaries with the people she loved most. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to take away from this remarkable case study. If you've spent your whole life being the one who was always fine, what will you build?